a dozen people I served in submarines with. And here you are with them, months, 6 of us in the Navy at one time from my family. In fact, we have a letter from the senator. We at one time we had the most boys in one service. All served in the Navy. All 7. We have 7 boys in the family. All of us served in the Navy, but my brother next to the oldest, he was frozen on his job. He worked in the Navy Yard, so he tried to get in, but he couldn't. The rest, the 6 of us all served.
Okay, today is March 29th, 1988. My name is Joe Todd, and this is an interview with Mr. Claude Berry in Shawnee, Oklahoma. And your address is 525 Patchen?
North Patchen.
North Patchen. Okay. Mr. Berry, where were you born?
Kansas. Little River, Kansas.
Little River, Kansas.
Small town.
And when's your birthday?
September 13, 1917.
1917. Who was your father?
Roy Berry.
And your mother?
Lily Bell Berry.
Lily Bell.
B-E-L-L-E.
Okay.
Finally, I got that.
Yeah. Did you go through school in Little River?
Yes, I graduated high school after.
What year?
1935.
1935. That was right in the middle of the Depression.
Right, it sure was.
How bad was the Depression around Little River?
It was bad. That is, as far as I lived on wheat farm, so we were in a way fortunate. We didn't go hungry, But money, a nickel it was hard to get out there. A dollar you just never seen. It was bad for us.
What type of What type of work did your father do?
What?
What type of work did your father do?
Wheat farmers.
A wheat farmer. So you work in wheat fields?
Yeah. I never missed a harvest till went to the Navy. I guess even used to go back after my folks moved to Colorado in 1937. I went back for every harvest. I never missed a wheat harvest.
Could you tell me how wheat harvest changed through the years when you were there in Kansas?
Well, when wheat harvest is when I remembered as young, I'll say younger boy, up until 12 or it was done with binders there mostly, horse-drawn. Tractors were almost non-existent when I was a child. And we did do I don't know whether the term is familiar, the heading. The binder puts it in the bundle, sheaves as you will, what word you want to use. And the heading, you just cut the tops off to get the grain. We did a lot of binding because we used the straw for bedding and for your animals and that purpose. So some preferred binding and some just wanted the wheat. So bigger farmers, we were what we call, we were diversified. We had road crops too, but wheat was our money crop. That was what we relied on for our cash.
What was the price of wheat in those years?
What type?
Well, no, what was the price of wheat?
Well, if you got $1 a bushel, that was good. Anything above $1 a bushel at that time was good. Now, there was a time during the Depression that wheat dropped to 25 cents a bushel, and the markets closed. You couldn't even sell it if you had it. So the people like us, if you needed the money, that's the way you got money. You stowed your wheat in granaries, and you tried to use it for when you needed some cash. But I can remember the time, I guess it was in, I don't know, probably 33 or 34, 32, 33, I would guess. There was no market. The wheat market closed, so but we used to figure if we got $1 a bushel, and a yield of 15 bushel was a good yield.
Yeah. And
per
also,
acre.
what type of wheat did you grow? What type of wheat did you have?
It's a black haul that we raised. It's a hard winter grain, the same wheat. They have different varieties now, but it was the same type. Oklahoma has the hard winter wheat, which is the best wheat. Of course, Kansas is the biggest producer of
Yeah, right.
wheat. But it is all winter wheat there. It was, I can't, that is, I don't know of anyone that planted spring wheat, the soft wheat as we called it.
What did you do after high school?
Mostly farm work, some carpenter helper work, and all about. I didn't have a steady job. I never went into factory work or production work like that. I worked on the farm. So, in fact, until I went in the Navy in 1939.
Why did you join the Navy over the Army or the Marines?
Well, it's because my older brother had been in, I suppose, really. An interesting thing was one reason I joined when I did. The brother next to me, we were close. He's 2 years older than I am. He'd been in the Navy. He wasn't too particularly fond of the Navy. He served on the Marblehead and the Asiatic Fleet, because that was a light cruiser. But in '39, we were in Colorado, and I was picking corn. Corn's this high, the snow's this high, if you know what I mean. And he was telling me, he said, we're going to be in war within 2 years. So he said, if you're thinking about going to service, he said, now is a good time to do it. He did a cruise and was out. He said, I'm going to re-enlist. And I said, oh, so you didn't like the Navy, you told me. He says, yes, but I know I'm going to have to go, or I want to go, he said, if war breaks out. And he said, I want to go in something I know. So he re-enlisted, and I went up with him, and I enlisted too. Of course, he shipped right out. He didn't have to. I had to go through boot camp.
Where'd you go to boot camp?
San Diego.
Tell me about boot camp.
Boot camp was, I tell you, boot camp was a good deal. Navy boot camp then is a good deal like you see the Marine boots. It depicts now, maybe not quite as harsh, but it was a 3 months, and it was the same type. When you met we had chiefs as drill instructors there, all chiefs, no first class or lower than chief petty officer. When I first went there, I thought this Chief Moore was my drill instructor, the meanest man in the world. You never walk no place, you run. And we drilled the grinders. The first 3 weeks you're in quarantine. You don't go no place, you're in a little area down there, but you drill all day. And then you were issued a sea bag, a hammock, which included a hammock and a sea bag about so high. Then all your clothes went into that, and you stowed them, wet or dry. And while you're in boot camp, every night you had to wash a complete uniform, and we wore whites there all the time I was in boot camp. Oh, I was there in the winter time, and it was pretty cold. We still wore the whites. You had to wash a complete outfit every night by hand and hang it on the line. And I'll swear that chief could count the socks. If you missed one sock, he would catch you. It was rough. It was, to me, the physical part, because I'd been working farm work, and I was in good physical. I was 22 years old. I was older than actually most of them were in their late teens or that were in there. So I was a little better off that way. And I had been away from home, so the homesickness part didn't. And the physical part, because I was good physically, but it was just about like I would say that your movies depicted. You no good, you were nothing, you know. And it's a good, just sort of a reminder. And marching, and we used the old squad movement. Now they changed that. You had 8 men to a squad, and you did these different maneuvers in drill. It's all training. Now your drill instructors always carried swords. That was their badge of authority, you see. and he would walk down there. He was a man about my size, small man, but he had a voice you could hear from here to Tecumseh. And if you got one step out of line, you felt that sword on your butt thing. He just reached up and slapped you, not leave a mark, but it stung. And just one incident of me, I tried to, I always believed if they're the rules, so if you're going to be here, live by them. And I found that if you live by them, they're easier, and there weren't that, come think about it, they never asked you nothing you couldn't do, but they made you do it, give their time. So that's the way I tried to do it. But one morning we had a line, we had 15 minutes from the time Reveille meant to be on the line. That means shoes shine and everything. So I'd come out one morning, I always thought I was good and neat, and he stopped in front of me, and that chief chewed me out. I thought I was the crummiest man in the Navy, and I didn't know what it was. And I'd spilled a little bit of toothpaste when I'd run in to brush my teeth on my shoe. And that night I walked a grinder with that packed sea bag. That thing weighs almost a full packed sea bag. You had a bucket that was issued to you then too, because everybody wears their own clothes. You carried that with you. Wrapped your hammock, all your clothes. It weighed, I would guess, about around 100, 110 pounds on your shoulder. And I walked that boot camp, or that grinder. You'd walk that.
What's a grinder?
That's where you drill field. They call it the grinder. It's a drill field. Actually, blacktop asphalt. And I walked that for 2 hours, and you couldn't set that down. Now, some people say, well, you're a small man, but you can. You could change shoulders, but you couldn't set her down.
How far around the grinder?
Oh, I would guess it was probably, I guess close to a mile. Maybe not quite that, but you had a definite time that you walked it. So I didn't spill any more toothpaste on my shoes. But then toward the end of then when you went into the last month, you went into classwork mostly. Then everything changed. It was just like moving into a different world. You got liberty on weekends, not long liberty. Of course, you didn't have much money. $21 a month is what I was drawing when I went in. But it was big. But then everything changed. You started to, your attitude toward this mean old chief started to change. See, you started to realize what the man he was, an intelligent man. And then you started to be classwork mostly. Just teaching Navy lore. You got some Navy history and just breaking you in. And your hard drilling then was over with for us. I think the Marines probably they carried theirs on through, because they are a different now. They're a combat or foot soldier from the Navy or part of the Navy, and but we then our last month was mostly classwork. Then when I got through boot camp, I went to what they call a Class A school, which not bragging, but it was an honor to be picked. See, it was only out of a company of 100. We had 120 men a company, and I guess I think there was 6. I wouldn't say that. I think 6 or 7 companies going through boot camp same time I was.
And what's a Class A school?
That's the first school you go if you want to. You have an A, B, and C schools. A is like you would say a beginner school. I went to. I had a chance to go to electric or an ordnance school. Well, my brother was a gunner's mate, which is ordnance. So I said, well, I would pick the ordnance. At first, I didn't want to go because I wanted to go home on leave with the rest of them, and you get your boot leave, see. But he says, you'll be glad you did. He says, you take it. He says, you only want it's 16 weeks, 4 months. And So he taught me into it. So I took ordnance. I could have went for first month. We took both basic electricity and ordnance. And if you think any school is tough you ever went to, you never know what a tough school is till you go to one of those. They put work at you so fast. I just said, and I thought I'm not no genius, but I was I was a B student, I'll say. So I thought, I can compete with anybody. But I got in that thing, and they put work at. Lights went out at 10 o'clock, and we worked from the time. And Reveille was at 6, and all of us worked till we got on those lessons, courses. They put so much to you, and and it was us every time they'd give you assignment, like ordnance, that's gunnery. They give us I can remember the 50 caliber machine gun, for instance. That was the old Browning 50 caliber, and your instructor would every week you would start something new, and he showed us 50 caliber. He said, this is a Browning 50 caliber machine gun, shoots 600 rounds a minute. It has 257 parts, and by Friday you will know every part in it. You will know what its functions are. You will be able to assemble it and disassemble it blindfolded. That strip, for cleaning. I said, no way can I do that. But we did. They have a real good method of teaching. They pour it on you so fast. But see, you have to pass certain tests, like an IQ test is what it is. That's the only IQ test I ever took that I remember of. To get an ordnance, I think a minimum requirement was 110. Mine wasn't 128 was mine. I wasn't no genius, but which was good enough for any school.
What was their method to teach?
They have. I went to instructor school later, just shipboard training instructor school. I don't know what they drop lesson plans, and they go by this method. Need to know first. That's their primary. What you need to know to do your job, whatever it might be. And then good to know. And then that is secondary. You try to learn that, and then things you would like to know. That's the way. And then you set up lesson plans here. A, B, and C. You draw it out. What nomenclature, the parts, its purpose, the parts, and what these parts do. That's the way they teach you. And it's I wish I had it, but I gave my log. I had an ordnance log I think we had to write too. And I gave that to my grandson. I wish I'd have kept it, because he made bad use of that. I forgot that I had the black powder formula in there, and he found it and made the black powder. And of course, you could go in the library and get it, but like the smokeless powder too, we had to know how to, the manufacturers, we call the gun cotton, the smokeless powder, and all your explosives which have to do with ordnance and what are used, like your tetrol for the, we always kick out of trinitrophenylmethyl nitramine, the longest name they had, which is a simple tetrol, is a detonator for depth charges, and a lot of your explosives use cast TNT. To a lot of people think explosives are like TNT and stuff are dangerous. They're not dangerous at all, anyway, in handling. They're so hard to set off. In fact, they will withstand the hit of a 4-inch shell and not explode.
They will.
Yeah, they will. And fire, I don't know what heat. I don't think you could get enough heat unless you put them in some blast furnace tube. Won't set them off. You use tetrol now. We use tetrol in that for the detonator. Now your depth charges on your destroyers, they're on the fantail in rows, and what they do is they just used to, when I was, of course now everything is different ships. I have to go to what I was with. You just rolled them out of chutes and dropped them off the fantail, the back, as you passed over a submarine or wherever. But your detonators were never installed until you were going to use them. That was because they were set for depth, water pressure. Say that you want to set them at 200 feet. You installed them, which was a quick job. They just had a place, you just lift them in, took them off. And that was a gunner's mate's job, which was one of mine. When I never served on destroyers, but I had, well, I did too, a short while. And attack personnel carrier. But we had to know how to do it. In fact, when I was on submarines, we had demolition blocks for destruction. Say that we did perchance get caught on the surface and maybe we're going to be captured. I had TNT, cast TNT, detonation blocks, and with them igniters, and that was one of my jobs, to install igniters to blow up. I'd attach them to the warheads, torpedo warheads, and because you would blow up the ship rather than that. And that was American Navy submarines.
So
you never were captured. You blew up the ship.
Now what about the crew? What happened to the crew?
They were gone too. That see, you did away with all your escape mechanism when you went on a war patrol run. See, you could escape from submarines from down, I'll say, probably 200 feet depths, and that was one of the practices. I knew you didn't do it on a submarine. I never did on a submarine. I went through the tower training there in Pearl Harbor at a sub-base, Subron 4, and you had to go through that before you went on submarines. There was a 110-foot tank that you escaped from, using the Munson lung. But when you, after the war started, and all that equipment was removed, because they didn't, although there were some submarine men were captured later in the war when they got in too close and they couldn't dive. They were blew up and they were blew off the ship and kept very few. I don't know of any that you actually you had no escape once you were on there.
Yeah.
But there was good things about it too. The things you put up top, got hot up top side, we could always dive. Of course, sometimes they got hot below.
After the ordnance school,
yeah.
Where were you sent?
I was sent, well, yeah, I went on leave, then I went directly to Pearl Harbor, to Hawaii, on Yorktown, just
On Yorktown?
on the old Yorktown. It was the old Yorktown. I don't remember a number, I believe it was 10. That's like I say, numbers and dates. But I left in June sometime, whatever the date was, of 40. And I reported to my first stop was the Richmond, which was a light cruiser. We transferred over to the Richmond. It carried a submarine flag, Squadron 6 at that time. For why, I don't know. A light cruiser, which is unusual. Usually a tender carries the flag. But, and this might sound untrue, but it isn't. At that time, in 40, peacetime, down in Honolulu, Hawaii, baseball was the biggest thing going. For ships that were, even ships that came in, everybody had a baseball team. So when we went aboard Richmond here, I'm glad to get settled. They lined all up. Here we are, all seaman seconds, or most all of us. They never asked us what, where'd you been to school or where you came from or not. They said, are there any ball players in the bunch? And that's just the truth. So I was a baseball fan. I thought it was true. I played high school and all that. So you stand here, you stand here. So all the baseball players stayed on in Richmond. The rest is transferred to the sub-base, which is Squadron 4. Subron 4. They call it Subron, that's the Squadron 4. So I stayed on Richmond. I can't even tell you a short time. And that's what I did. I went out. I was assigned to a division. I'd get up and scrub down the decks and shine right work in the morning. Then I went in the afternoon. We'd go out and play ball. And the Holland, which is a subtender, one of the old, well, it was the oldest, was anchored right in front of us. And we played them, and Commander Welchel, one is Hard Rock Welchel. There's quite a history about him. He was the executive officer and also the baseball coach. So we played him, and after the game, he come over and he said, asked me, he says, Barry, how would you like to go to the Holland? I says, Commander, as a seaman second, you're scared to death to talk to anybody that high, just about, because I hadn't been that long out. I said, I'm not doing nothing on a Richmond. That would be fine with me. The next day I was transferred to Holland, which is a subtender. And here comes the fallacy about every submarine man is volunteer. The only thing I volunteered for was to play baseball. But when I got on a Holland, to be on a Holland at that time, you had to physically qualify for submarine duty, which meant regular physical. You couldn't have only maybe tooth filling in your teeth and your hearing, and it's a little stricter than it is for. Then we had to go through this tank I was telling you about, the escape tank, to see if you could take pressure. I think the most pressure we were under was about 55 pounds, so that would make this tank about 110 foot high.
Now, describe this tank. What's this tank for?
It's just a long, I'll tell you, you know what a silo looks like?
Yeah.
Where they still silo. Well, if you've seen it from a distance, that's what it resembles. But it's filled with water, but that's what it resembles. And then down, they have a different, as far as I know, there's only 2 levels on it. Yeah, there's a 50-foot level, and then down below is the 100-foot. These are pressure tanks with an opening into this tanks, silo-like, is filled with water. And these are pressure tanks. So you go into those tanks. They build up the pressure till it equals the water pressure at that depth. Water pressure is 0.44 pounds per foot. So they build it up to that pressure. That's the reason you had to be able to take pressure. Some people couldn't, although there were nothing matter with them, they just couldn't take it. Usually, if you could take over 15 pounds, you could take the maximum. But I never had no problem. I could equalize, pop your ears. Some people can't, going up and down a plane, you pop and change altitude. I pop all the time, but they told us to hold your nose and blow. I can't pop my ears that way. I swallow and mine pop easy. But then you go down this 55-foot, or the 100-foot level. You go to 50-foot escape first, and then you have to decompress even from that level with a Munson lung. You breathe through your mouth, and it's left on shoulder thing. And they build the pressure up to equalize. It seemed to me like it was 50 pounds. Well, that's close anyhow. I know that it's an odd feeling. You talk to somebody on the other side of the chamber, and he can't hardly hear you because of the pressure. See, your voice.
Now you're inside a chamber.
Yeah, we're in the chamber. Yeah.
Okay.
It's there. You go in from the outside at the base of the tank, and then they seal it, and then they start the pressure. And then when it equalizes the water pressure from outside, you can open the door, and you can walk right out into the tank. And they have a line that you followed up. It had various markers on. I don't remember. It seemed to me like 3 times we had to stop. The only difficult part was they would tell you make sure that you try and lock your feet around that lower line. Don't let them fly up over your head. And it was hard. When I first trip I made up, because I didn't get feet locked good. And first thing you know, your feet are up there, and you don't want that. But you go to the first. It was a knot on the line, and you count. Say you had to decompress for 2 minutes, and you counted by hundreds, 200 times. Then you went to the next knot, and you had a certain period of time to decompress, and you come out the top.
You could just go from the bottom and just head up to the top.
Yeah, but now This is something that has changed. They found out later that you can make a free ascent with no Munson lung from, I believe, 100 depths of 120, 130 feet, and they do it all the time afterwards. But then the Munson lung was supposed to have been one of the greatest inventions this fellow invented, but it was escape.
What is the Munson lung?
It's what it is. It's filled with oxygen. The mixture, so that you just breathe it like practically this, just like air. And you put it in your mouth, and you have a cap that goes over your nose, so that you won't breathe through your nose. And you just breathe through your mouth instead of your nose, so that you can stay underwater for, oh, I guess you can stay for a period of about 10, 15, 20 minutes, or maybe longer. I don't know how long. I would guess 10 to 15, because that would be the maximum that you could, your body would stand pressure anyhow. But then they went to the free exhale. Instead of taking in all the air they can, they teach you to blow all your air out, get rid of all the air. Because what the danger is the bends, the oxygen getting in your bloodstream. That's what causes the bends, the change of the pressure. So they found out by expelling all your air and going right up. And from, I think I said, now I wouldn't, you know that's true, but I think from 100 up to 120 feet they can do that. But the Munson lung, you could go from 200 feet up, I think, or maybe a little deeper.
When you were going over in the Yorktown to Hawaii, were you aware of the world situation, you know, the war in Europe?
No. Oh, in Europe, yes.
Yeah.
We were aware of the war in Europe, but it wasn't, it really wasn't on our mind much. In fact is that we were, you could say that America was, in that sense, they felt real secure. I won't say conceited, but secure that our Navy could stop anything that we knew the Japanese were building up. We knew that. Naturally, we had intelligence. We didn't know, although we didn't have very good intelligence, or we would have known how much they did build up, but they built. But we figured that we could stop anything, so we never worried about them in Europe. But we were well aware of the situation in Europe. But at that time, in '40, we, as far as our being involved in, even when we, some of our people that joined the Canadian Air Force, and even we sent the Fatal 50 over. In fact, my brother, what we call the Fatal 50, they were 50 World War I destroyers. We called them the flesh deck, 4 stackers. The reason they're flesh deck, they're I think their beam was 26. They're about 300 foot long, and a beam of only 26 feet. So you can imagine you don't have. But they were what we call a flesh deck, and they had been in mothballs, and they took them out and give them to England on the Lend-Lease program that was going on. And we took them out, and they called them the Fatal 50. Now my brother had to deliver them someplace, I think to Halifax. That is, we had to deliver all of them. They took 50 of them out and give them to England. So that was where the Fatal 50 come in.
Did you take part in that?
What?
Did you take part in delivering those ships?
No, I didn't, but my brother did. I went down there when they were putting them back in commission, see the work, and I tell them about it. I said, boy, I don't know what good they're going to do anybody, but they did serve them a lot. They used them for convoy service.
Where were they in mothballs?
What?
Where were they
in San Diego?
San Diego. Okay. When you first saw the Yorktown, what was your impression?
I'd never seen anything as big in my life. That was my first impression, floating.
What were your quarters on the Yorktown?
Well, we see as passengers, we just give us, what they did is just give us a quarter of the hangar deck, see, because you had your own, that's when I say you carried everything with you. We had the hammocks or mattress, but they didn't have a place where you'd swing a hammock. They had no stanchions to swing hammocks, so you just laid them on the deck, and that's where you slept. You had your little ditty bag with your toilet gear in well, you carried everything that you needed with you. You had your bucket to get water, and that was, you carried that with you.
How long did it take to get from, did you catch Yorktown to San Pedro?
What?
Did you go aboard at San Pedro?
No, that's San Diego.
San Diego.
At North Island.
How long did it take to get to Hawaii?
I would guess it. I would guess it took us about. I'd say maybe 6 days, 7 days. But in fact, the old Yorktown is probably as fast as our carriers are today, except for our nuclear submarine. Carriers, believe it or not, will run the tail off of any ship we had, except the cruisers and maybe your new battle wagons, the new Dakota class that came out. In fact, the Missouri was the first one I ever seen of the new class. Now they could keep up with the carrier task group, but your destroyers could keep up with them, but they had to be refueled every third or fourth days with the fast tasks. That was our biggest problem in the South Pacific. With the task group, of course, I wasn't in service, but I was well aware of what was keeping supplied for your, because everything operated eventually around your aircraft carriers. They were screened by cruisers, and destroyers, and when they traveled at an average of 30 knots, I'll say, when they were going someplace. The maximum speed, I'll say, of a carrier is probably 34, 35 knots. A cruiser, could do that. This is full speed, flank speed. Like your cruiser has 4 boilers. Ordinarily, you steam with 2 for economy reasons. But with 4 boilers bent on, we'd make speed runs. That was part of our practice every year, and I think we did make 34 knots once, and that is everything that you get out of it. The enormous power it takes to run one. You can do 26 knots with 2 boilers, but to get that extra 8 knots, you have to put 2 more of the same boilers on the line. There's it's just a physical factor that after things go so fast in the air, they build up such a resistance, they reach a maximum how fast they can go. You know, that's the reason they spend so much time in configuration and building their ships, I think. Now, your new submarines were built entirely different shape than the old ones. They were built more like you've seen the picture, more like a dolphin shape. And they can do, their top speed of nuclear submarines is confidential. I don't know, I have no idea, but I know they can do a tremendous speed.
When did you go aboard the Richmond?
The Richmond in Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor.
It was tied up at sub base.
Was it an oil or coal burner?
What?
Was it oil or coal burner?
It was oil. They had no coal burners. I think they had one in commission, but I'd never seen a coal burner when I was in.
And what were your duties on the Richmond, besides playing baseball?
Just deckhand. That was all. Deckhand is anything from chip and paint to, deck work, whatever come up. Chip and paint, or even if they required men for a boat crew to go someplace. It's just common, what would you call it, upkeep of the ship, really.
Now, the Richmond was a light cruiser?
That was Richmond was an old light cruiser.
Did they have wooden decks or steel decks?
They had wooden decks.
Wooden decks. But
they had the old turret, like 6-inch guns. And wooden decks. You brought up a question. No, I know that they had the wooden decks. Yeah, they had the wooden decks. Yeah, although they took these off during the war for splinter purposes. But the cruisers, they had wooden decks, like your battleships and your cruisers.
You Holy Stone the deck?
What?
Did you Holy Stone the deck?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about that.
Holy stone is, I'll tell you what, the best way to describe a holy stone is to take, send here.
Okay.
This make it good. That just about is it. One board. They'll cover one board, which is approximately 4 inches, and it's just a rock. It's a kind of a coarse rock. I don't know what kind of rock it is. And right in the center is I'll say they're about 2 inches thick, and probably an inch hole there in the center. And you take a swab handle, just like you would take a regular old mop out here you got, and you stick one end in that, and you grab it like this, and you usually operate it in groups of 4 people, and you grab this one, you go this way and this way. You took 4 strokes on each board, and there was a bosun mate there telling you. Now I'll try to remember the words you use. Oh, you'd get in unison later on. People always dreamed up tunes and stuff, but I can remember. Holy rock, 1, 2, 3, 4. Holy rock. That went on, and then shift. You shift to the next board. See, and then you probably know how big area you cover, but there would be maybe 5 or 6 of you here in this line, and you only you didn't holy rock every day. In fact, probably sometimes you may go a month, but ordinarily used to be once a week, and then the rest of the time you just use sand. You always carried sand. You had a sand locker, and you used these stiff bristle brushes, and you wash down with sand to clean the decks. And you take these older cruisers, well, even the Toledo, the last one I served on, you take them older cruisers, the one I went in and went aboard some of them. Those decks are they were almost white, that they'd been salt water and sea, and you could eat off of them. They kept them decks clean. The Navy, when I first went in, I used to say cleanliness was next to godliness, and they believed you scrubbed everything. Now later on they started in the same way. They paint instead of where they should be scrubbing, they paint. And that used to be my trouble with my gunner's mates. Once in a while, after I made chief and everything, they'd want some paint for something, and so I'd say, well, what do you need paint for? Well, I said, all you can do is get some salt water soap and a terry cloth. You could draw that. That's our scrub cloth, and we'll scrub it. And that's the way they used to. You never painted until you got to scrub down to bare metal.
Where was your station during general quarters on the Richmond?
What?
Where was your station during general quarters on the Richmond?
I was just on I was supposed to be, and never had general quarters while I was on. I was just on it just a short while. See, the only thing I had, that was the general quarter station that was posted, and you had a fire stations. You had a general quarters building, general quarter stations, your fire stations, and this that you manned. And I was in some 6-inch ammunition handling crew, so you could take anybody. So, but I never had to go. In fact, I probably would have. They showed me, but I would have had a hard time. But I never had. I didn't stay on there. Just, like I say, a few weeks until I went to the Holland.
Now the Holland, was it also a cruiser?
No, it's a sub-tender, submarine tender.
I'm sorry.
Submarine tender. Okay.
What does a sub-tender do?
Take care of submarines. We was Squadron 6. We took over Squadron 6 boats. Instead of them going to Submarine 4 is a base, land base. The rest of your submarines, you have several. I can't remember the name of your subtender. Like the Holland, we had all of our boats began with the S, and I can't even recall the number. I know the sailfish, which was the old squalus that was sunk and brought up, the swordfish, the seal, I believe the salmon. All submarines before were named after fish during the war. But anyhow, now we took care of them boats. They come in like for refueling and torpedoes or anything they needed. We, instead of them going to sub base, we handled all that stuff for them.
Will you down here?
Let me get close.
Okay.
I only have one eye now, but I'll have to wear colored glasses. Yeah, sub base here. Yeah, oh yeah, very familiar. Here, see this right here?
Okay, can we, yeah.
Actually, right here. See this Peleus? I was aboard her later on.
Okay, can I get,
Okay.
yeah, that way.
Oh. Let me show you here. See here? The Peleus is tied up about right ahead of this Peleus. This is where the Holland always tied up. Now, we never went to sea more than once a quarter. And this is the sub base, Squadron 4. The single pack headquarters was exactly the same place. It was over the armory where I later was at. The Peleus here, this is what we call, right across here was Magazine Island. Oh, wait a minute. Let's get this. This shows this all the way up. A little longer than I remember it. But this wharf, unless it's been changed, probably not. Just a little ways up here, and we walked around over here. This is Magazine Island. That's where they had the mine depot at. Over here was the, I never remember the name of that. It was a mine layer tender, but used to tie up here. It was hit on the 7th. And this is Pier 4. This is 1, 2, 3, Pier 4. Right there, submarine piers.
Yeah.
That's where we tied up when we came in. I don't know which one. We usually tied up at 4 when I was on there. Although we were Squadron 6, we didn't, during the war, they operated out of Pearl.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
did.
Okay.
But the Peleus, I served on her. That's where I went to the Grayling submarine from the Peleus. Yeah, that's a good picture.
What was the attitude of the Hawaiians toward the mainlanders?
What?
What was the attitude of the Hawaiians toward the mainlanders?
Oh, good. They liked mainland. They were, as they say, howlies. They liked the howlies, of course. They got along good. They always talked about the mainland, and they always wanted to go. Something a lot of people don't realize. I believe be pretty almost correct when I said that Hawaii, the population was 70 to 75% of Japanese ancestry. By far the biggest. Your old Hawaiian Polynesian is, well, they were kind of in the back. You didn't see too many of the real old Hawaiian, but the real Hawaiian Polynesian, they were big people, big race of people. They were some of the finest people. If you had a Hawaiian friend, you had a friend for life. They were that. They didn't give you anything. That's the reason they never had none. You go to one of their parties. I've been to their regular old luau's before the war, which they were regular luau, and but they were nice people. And there was my wife now is Portuguese. There was quite several Portuguese there. She was from an island, born there, and Filipinos. I'd say there was one area there, Kalihi, that was almost all Philippine population, but your majority were either a few mainlanders, haoles as they would call them, Kamahinas is the old timer, and there. But your majority were Japanese, few Chinese, and like I say, the Portuguese, and the few Hawaiians, the Polynesians, and that made up. But most of them were Japanese.
Any incident you can relate from the time you arrived at Hawaii until December 7th? Anything happened in that period that sticks in your mind?
Well, yes, there is quite a bit. In fact, is something very interesting that a lot of people don't know, or they know it, but it hasn't been put out. See, when I was on the Hollands, I was telling you, after playing ball, we were coming back to the States for a overhaul for some reason, because Holland was going to go to the Far East, the Philippines. And here I hadn't been back to the States, so now I wanted to get back and get leave. And we're in the Navy Yard getting this work done. And all of a sudden one day everything stopped. And we got the notice that there'll be no liberty for approximately 1 week, that were resurfaced. This must have been September of '41. We called in all the Squadron 6 boats that were at sea and around. We removed exercise heads. Exercise heads on the torpedoes are a water field they use for firing practice. And they reclaim them and shoot them again. We replaced all the exercise head with warheads. So when they said that the word came out, the submarines are at sea with exercise heads on, was not true. I know if we did it, Squadron 6 did it, all the other ones did. We worked day and night for almost 4 days or so. And every submarine was sent out from this was sent out with 90 days supply of food. And that was in September or the early part of October. I may run over a little, but it was in that piece of time. So, and we were placed, so we were told that we were placed on a war alert. That was in the 1st of October, or latter part of September, like I said, my dates were mixed up. We were on a war alert, which is like here, I'll say war alert is like a tornado watch. Occasions of riot, that something could happen. And so that's why I always wondered that, later on anyway. But I got transferred off the Holland. I was the maddest man in the Navy. I'd saved all my money, hadn't went ashore, and I wanted to come back. And then I was transferred to, they needed, at that time everything was, they had so many people, so they needed 1 third-class gunner's mate with 2 years service to do. Transferred to Sub-Ron 4, and I was the only one.
Transferred to where?
To Squadron 4, sub-base, here.
Yeah, okay.
This place here, sub-base, Sub-Ron. If I say Sub-Ron, that's Squadron 4. Sub, it's always spoken of as Sub-Ron 6, Sub-Ron 4. This is Sub-Ron 4. Which, by the way, had the best baseball team. But, so I was transferred there. So when I went to Sub-Ron 4, I was sent to a mine detail. Now, when I was on the Holland, I had worked on the mine detail. We had a mine detail from the Holland, and this is where we went, over to this magazine island. But you walked up here at the head of the wharf, you could walk across there. There was, to me, this part here, of course, this has probably been changed. This has probably been dredged out and all this. I would say, now this wharf looks real familiar. I would say, but before, probably now, I don't know when this was made, that about right here. It wasn't too great, well, maybe less than a half a mile. I'd say you walk over here to a building. That was a mine overhaul building. That's where I worked.
Okay.
And that's when I went. Then I went to Sub Base 4. So then I was working at mine detail, which wasn't, I learned something a little bit about mine, not much. But shore patrol, I don't know whether you are familiar with the shore Navy Shore Patrol. I know you've heard of the MPs in the Army, and see, now that is a regular force, an MO. You're an MP. That's what you are. You're with the MP. But in the Navy, a shore patrol is shore police, and it's not any permanent billet. Everyone except certain rates, like pharmacist maids, yeomen, but most all Navy petty officers have to take their turn of shore patrol. When you send 100, let's say, just to use a figure, this ratio may not be right, but I would say if you figured, if you were on a ship and you figured 100 sailors were going ashore, you had to furnish one shore patrol. Well, when I was here, the way the sub base operated, they would send a man for 3 months, period, because they were shore base. See?
Where were you on here again? Where were you?
Here, I was stationed here. Sub base.
Okay.
But this is sub base. This looks like the barracks. I don't know what that represents, but that's about where the barracks were. But now shore patrol. So I was being inside command. Nobody wanted a job, but I was the last one there, and we had to send one over. So I went on what they call permanent shore patrol. It was a 3 months tour of duty. And now sub base headquarters, shore patrol headquarters over in Honolulu. They're at what we call the Old Naval Station. At one time it was an old naval station. We had a small dispensary there, a doctor in the barracks, and they was, I guess, this is a wild guess. I would guess there were probably 50 of us stationed there. About 20 Marines, and the rest were sailors. Now all we did was shore patrol, shore police.
What were your duties as shore police?
Well, take care of the sailors. That's all you did. Sailors that come over imbibed too much, that was your biggest problem. See, you picked them up or if they fight, they called the shore patrol. You walked a beat or drove the wagon. Or stayed at the shore patrol headquarters is right next to the police. So you took care of the soldier. We had a drunk tank, the same as your police station had. We'd bring them down in there and we put them in there. And then we had our paddy wagons and we hauled them back. Now we had Honolulu is relatively small. Well, when I went there before, well, it still is. Honolulu's not a really big now. It is in population-wise, but we had very little trouble except with people imbibing too much and a few fights but serious problem, very little.
Did you have any special training to be a shore police?
No, only what your military training. You were taught. I didn't have to do. I went through after I went on this 3 months permanent shore patrol. But on your ship, you still do it, but you're just supposed to know how to handle them. You get instruction. You had shore patrol officers, and like the permanent shore patrol are the experienced ones. Supposedly, we were after you were there. You take care of the ones who instruct the ones that come from the ships. They report into the permanent shore head patrol head shore patrol quarters here at it's on 4th Street, and but that's what you do. You take care, keep the sailors in line. The police pick them up too. Now this is something that is true. There's no such thing as double jeopardy for a serviceman, because you're subject to civil law first if you commit a civil crime, say, which happens. The police can pick you up anytime if you're out of line. I mean, drunk, fighting. And we had real good working relations with Hawaiian police. But do you talk about rough? Those roughest people, I wouldn't want to get in trouble with. But they treated, believe it or not, they treated most sailors with kid gloves. They didn't. They'd pick them up. Because if they wasn't, they'd call a shore patrol. We could only have so many cover a certain area. But if they happened to be at the site, they picked them up. Or if it was some crime about in doubt, maybe a robbery or a breaking in. We had one case of a break-in, a jewelry store that I was very involved in. I got involved in later. What they did, they brought them down and they threw them. Sometimes they put them in the jail. And if it was a crime they thought it might deserve trial, but ordinarily they would just call over to shore and say, we got one of your sailors over here. Come and get him. So we come and get him. If it was just a case of guy had too much to drink, and that we just took and throw him in. And that was as far as we went. And we never, on those people, unless they got real nasty, or because by the next morning or when we hauled them back to the ship, they were all sobered up and contrite. And so all we did, we wrote what we call a stagger charge on them. And then no report followed. It didn't go in a record or nothing. Of course, if it got habitual, sometimes, then they were written up for drunkenness, which is a difference. I mean, the way he maybe retreated back aboard ship. We had some of those that were habitual ones, and they usually ended up with court-martials aboard ship. But the Honolulu police were very, they worked with us good. Because, well, it took a load off of them, but they and for a town, I'll say for that small, they had good relations with the Navy. Of course, the Navy, probably through necessity, that was their biggest source of income in Hawaii, by far, was that naval base out there, Pearl Harbor.
What were you doing on December 6th?
6th, I was on shore patrol duty. I had the duty. We used to work 24 hours on, 24 off.
Did you notice anything different?
Yes. I was out I had to make a trip to Pearl for some reason, and I noticed all the battleships in, and I never have ever seen that many capital ships in the harbor at one time, especially battleships. Now there was no carriers in and no cruisers. But these battleships were lined up, and when I went back, I remarked, well, the person I went back with was Bill Cordray. I shouldn't say this, but they called him Whiskey Bill. I don't know whether he drank any more than anybody else. So I'd tell him, I said, I never seen so many capital ships in this harbor. And he said, I never have either. And he had been on the base for 3 or 4 years long, and he said, I never seen nothing like it. It was for the holidays. And that was the excuse they brought him in for the holiday. But we remarked about it, but that was just about as far as it goes. I never thought about it until the next day. It's a reason that if you talk to a lot of Navy men, including myself, something was wrong. Whether it was a bait or whether that's an awful word to say. I probably shouldn't say, but why would we pull something that was never really explained, I don't think, to anybody? Why all them capital ships were in?
When you say capital ship, what's a capital
I mean, I'm talking about major cruisers, battle wagons, carriers, or even destroyers. They are the men of war, regular men of war.
Yeah. Saturday night.
That was Saturday afternoon.
Did you notice anything different about Saturday night?
Nothing Saturday night, nothing, everything. We had more sailors ashore, that's all. We were busy. That's the only thing I can remember that was different than any other night. We just had so many sailors ashore. With all them ships in that we had.
Did you ever hear about any of the bars giving free whiskey?
Of the what?
Any of the bars giving whiskey away? Or people buying drinks for sailors that night?
You know, I never noticed it. Of course, if I had of, probably because we traveled a big, usually we would make a tour into the drinking places or when we were called in.
I've interviewed two guys, and they said that night, either bars were giving whiskey away or people were buying drinks, and that never happened before.
Well, now, as shore patrol, we never had any word on it.
Yeah.
And I didn't see any more, we had no more. In fact, I thought we said that we were warned ahead of time that it would be a mess, that there'd be an extra 10,000 maybe sailors ashore, which is an enormous amount of people. So we're busy. But now, I have heard that story, but of any of the places that I know of, or people that I know of, I never heard a sailor never told me that. I'll put it that way. That they were deceiving.
What type of beer joints, drinking establishments do they have in Honolulu?
Just like they do in any wet state like California, same thing. They had your motor coach and a Black Cat are probably two of the most known names around, because the bus stop that come in from Pearl was right across. The YMCA set here. Here's Hotel Street runs up this way. Here sets up, right up here is the Y, where a lot of sailors went. That's where the USO was, and you'd be surprised the sailors in there. And right across the street was a motor coach and a Black Cat Cafe, which were bars. And that was probably, they tended more service than anybody. This was Hotel Street, was where the bus come and unloaded. That was their unloading place, right at the YMCA.
I'd like to start December 7th. Would you tell me exactly what happened from the time you got up all the way through?
Well, I will tell you as nearly as I remember. I had been on duty until I would say it was between 3 and 4, closer to 4 o'clock in the morning. I was driving a paddy wagon, and I took the sailors back to the ship, which we did, the ones we had in a holding tank that had sobered up enough, and we took them back to the ship. And it was about 4 o'clock before I got off duty. And I went back to the old naval station and went to bed. And the next thing I know, somebody is pulling me out of bed, said Pearl Harbor's being attacked. Those, to my best of my recollection, the exact words the guy said. Because I says, get out of here, I'm sleepy. I just got off duty. I'm tired. You know, I took it as the guy was, and he kept shaking, get out of there, Berry. And then I heard somebody had a radio on, and it came on. I heard that, so then I jumped up and I went out. I went out, so that must have been right at approximately 8 o'clock or after. Now, we're this old naval station and the waterfront, downtown waterfront, piers where your liners come in and all that, was probably only 2 blocks, down from there. And there's some Coast Guard vessels that were either anchored out in the water or they may have been tied up at civilian piers. And I heard the gunfire going, and as I went out on the lanai, or as we call them, the porch, and looked around. I was getting dressed. Everybody running around naturally. And I seen these planes up there and shooting, but they were so far off target. I was still wondering what is going on. But when the planes turned, this was over the city, then I seen the ball, the rising sun, on the wings. Then I knew it was for real. So we got in a wagon. We were told to go uptown, commandeer every car that you can. So sailors coming out had been staying over town. Who they were staying with or what's none of my business. But they were coming out half dressed, and that's all their thought was, to get back to Pearl. So we took all the civilian car. If you were driving a car, we stopped you and we loaded the sailors and sent to Pearl with these sailors. Then about 9, or I'll say around 9, or maybe a little after, I was in a paddy wagon, and we took a load of sailors back to the base. It says, take this load out. So we went out, and we went down the old Fleet Landing. Now the old Fleet Landing, let me see if I can pinpoint it here. Now the old Fleet Landing was over in this area here. See, here's the Navy Yard, right? Down in this area was the old Fleet Landing, where the ships were anchored out, come in with the Liberty boats. So we went down, drove right in the gate and unloaded them, and all I could see, my first impression, before we got to the base, we could see the smoke, the heavy black smoke burning and all this. But when we drove in the gate and went down here, all I could see was fire, sailors in the water, and smoke and burning and bodies. And I did reach down, and they didn't tell us what to do except to deliver these sailors down. We took them right into Fleet Landing. And that's when I got, before then it was sort of disbelief. Then when I got there, I seen it. Then when I seen all these sailors, and I don't know how many sailors we lost, around 2,500. But it seemed to me like the whole Pearl Harbor was covered with sailors or hats and clothes. And I reached down to pull one man out, and the skin came off in my hand. Burned, so I pulled him. And it looked at me. It happened to be a chief that I had known out before, which is, then you have got that sick feeling that this is just, and that's the impression I got was disbelief. I couldn't believe it happened until I got there and seen it, and then I knew it. Then when I seen these sailors floating in the water, put it that way, you were just sick to your stomach. Then right away we didn't stay there just a short while, less than 30 minutes, and we went back downtown because martial law was declared immediately. And then downtown. So once you realize this had really happened, and the sickness part kind of went down a little bit, then you were just, I guess you got that feeling of anger more than anything. Anger, probably, just anybody would do this. So they put us on patrol. Now these are sailors, and they give us a World War I rifle, Springfield model 1903, and 100 rounds of ammunition, a World War I helmet, and we patrolled the streets. They kept everybody off the streets. Nobody was allowed on the streets except people with business. Everybody was checked. And we did that for 8 hours. the best I recall the first day, all I did was walk that beat till I was relieved to some play around 10, 11 o'clock at night to try to get some rest. And from then on, that was our duty. We'd go up with this 100 rounds of ammunition we had a belt on and these hats and patrol the streets. Then after 8 hours of that, we went on a patrol car, which was a Navy vehicle. Sometimes it may have been in a police car. And that was to enforce blackout or make sure nobody was moving, because nobody was supposed to be on the street. If we seen lights, sometimes we told them, warned them to turn them out. If they didn't, we shot them out in the houses or whatever, because we could have no lights. And they were real good. I said we had very little trouble with that. There were a few cases, but and that's the way we went.
Did you have to shoot any lights out?
Hmm?
Did you shoot any
I never
lights
did, but I was with the car that did. Good job. Fortunately, usually somebody did it by mistake. They probably opened the door or something. Of course, then we just told, were warned if we had a bullhorn. And all the cars were, what we did, they were all, your headlights were all covered, except for a little slit, and that was painted blue. Why blue, I guess, shows less, I don't know. But it would give you enough light you could see the street. And they called out the Territorial National Guard, which are people, kids 16 and under usually, and put them on the street, which was a big mistake, because they would holler, they would shoot and then holler, halt, see? But everybody was trigger happy, couldn't blame them.
Did you think the Japanese were going to invade?
Yep, we're going to land? Yes, very much so. We had a bus at the old naval station for shore patrol. We were supposed to, now I don't know what assault troops we would have made, not especially sailors, 20 Marines, but that bus was there, and if there was a reported landing, which we did make 2 or 3 runs, somebody reported there was a landing, somebody come, we got in that bus and we took off. Once we got in the wrong place, the Army had already was there and set up, and of course they started firing the machine guns. I started ducking, but nobody was hurt with it.
Were they firing at you?
Well, we were in a place we didn't belong. Yeah, so they were trigger happers, everything.
Where were you when that happened?
What? I don't even know what beach it was. I couldn't even tell you. It was out on some beach that had been set up in place. It was just those rare occasions, like we put Marines were on these civilian piers I was telling you about on the waterfront. They were guarding those, and every once in a while they'd even fired something. They thought you'd hear a gunshot go off. They thought they seen somebody sneak. So everybody for the first week, I'll tell you, it was pretty tense. They were trigger happy, but I thought as a whole there was no panic. Really wasn't.
What was the civilians' attitude when this was going on?
They were just scared, but they were sure there was a landing. We did too. We expected a landing. Do you know that within days, that all the currency in Hawaii was stamped with Hawaii across the face. And all your money was called in. And right across the face of it was black lettering, Hawaii.
Why?
Invasion money. In case the Japanese got it, it wouldn't be any good. That, I suppose, that's the only thing I can think. And that's something I never really thought much about until later years, but all your money was called in, and that was what it was, invasion money. In case they got it, it would be no good any place for it.
Did you see any Japanese flags in all the...
That day, I never seen any. I seen the Japanese, to me, that I did see. Now this is days later, when they then started opening things up, the things quieted out. They looked at you with fear more than anything. But I never, to me, I didn't look at them as some people said, well, have followed them or didn't you hate them? I didn't. I had no. To me, they were Hawaiians, and most people, service people, people there, Hawaiian. See, they were never sent to compounds like they were in the States, which I still think was a mistake. In fact, are some of our best. I did one time. This was, I'll say within 2 weeks, no, within a week, maybe a week, that I did go with some federal people on a raid on a house that they had picked up shortwave, and that definitely was a shortwave station, which a Japanese, and they picked him up, and this house he had was full of shortwave radio gear, so and that's all that amounted to.
Was he working with the Japanese?
That's only, well, as far as I know, of course, we didn't, all we went is with the feds took care of everything, federal men. We went as in case we had to break in, or if they were somebody in there that was going to try to something. The only thing that ever happened was some sailor with a riot gun in back had cocked the thing and discharged it, not like they jumped off the land. But that was the only incident that I was aware of. But there probably were some around. I heard this, I never seen it, but that they were arrows, and I can believe that. There had to be some spies in Hawaii, there's no doubt. But the Japanese had plenty because of the number, and easy. That their arrows cut in the sugarcane fields, pointing to Pearl Harbor. Now, I believe, I never seen them, but I believe that. Just sound makes for you. But here is something that a lot of people that bypass the thing, that should give them warning. The Army, they were from Fort Shafter, now where this radar station was. See, radar was relatively new then. But they had a radar station there that was manned. And these two Army people that were manning the station picked up these Japanese planes. Later, they determined they had to. And they were reported. They were reported to the officer of the day, the Army. So they dismissed the thing on account that they were either birds or the wrong identification. But I understand that these two soldiers were pretty insistent that they were planes. So then they said that they were probably Navy is holding next. We had carriers at sea, and usually your carriers send their planes in, like you'd land at Ford Island before they come in. But your squadrons, they'll just come in there and land and wait for the carrier. But we had, I don't know how many carriers we had there. I won't even attempt to guess. But no carriers came in. My brother was on the Astoria, a heavy cruiser, who was with the Yorktown. Now, that carrier was in the air. And it was supposed to come in that weekend, and it never came in. He stayed in. It used to be when your cruisers went to sea, you carried your own Liberty boats or launches. They'd left a senior petty officer. My brother was first class that time. He had about 12, 14 years in the Navy at that time, 12 years, I guess. And of course, everybody'd fight because his family was there. They wanted that job. See, it was just like having liberty. He'd go down, had the sailors take care of the boats, and then he'd probably go home on liberty. And he was home when they attacked. But his ship, Astoria, was at sea. That was a heavy cruiser. And she was with a carrier. But none of them came in. They sank the Utah, which is, here is Ford Island.
I think the Utah was on the other side of the island, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But
Here we are. All right, let's get over here. Get over on this.
I don't think it's on the map there. I think it's on the other side. I mean, it's on the other side of the island over here. But
Yeah,
it's
this
off
is
the map.
here we are, Fort
Yeah,
Island.
yeah.
There we are, Fort Island. Okay, Utah was on this side.
Yeah.
It was all it was a target ship. They mistook it for a battleship or a carrier, and they sank her. See, this is I can't see. Yeah, but here, where is the California?
Right here.
That's good. Okay. The California sunk right along. It was tied up to Fort side. It sank right there. You could see the only thing you could see was turret 3 above the water. Now it sank there. Oh, the Ogallala over here. And the helmet they said was inside here, which I didn't know. The helmet. Wait, that is a heavy cruiser. This is a better ship than I know. Where is the Oklahoma? That's the first thing that I really noticed, because it capsized.
Did you see it?
Right up, yes. It was the first thing it capsized immediately. Had to, because let's see, we was within less than an hour. But the Maryland, as far as I can remember the Maryland, but as far as I know, it sustained minor damage. But by the Oklahoma being capsized outside of her, she couldn't, no way for her to get out of there. I don't know when she got out. The West Virginia was sank. Of course, the Arizona blew up right there. In Nevada, this is where she was. But this isn't where.
Yeah,
Well,
it was beached, was it, in Nevada?
Yeah, the beach, the chief quartermaster beached her. Because she was damaged and he didn't want to block anything up the harbor. He beached her. The West Virginia was sank down. Oklahoma, the West Virginia. The California was on the bottom. The Pennsylvania was in dry dock. Don't show it, does it?
Yeah, I think it's off the map. It's
The Pennsylvania was in dry, and I don't think she's just. I heard that she did sustain it, but the thing is that was real amazing. Of course, I think that the Japanese were very surprised that that they met no opposition. So, but they never touched any installations. That's the reason we figured that invasion was, it just was inevitable that they were going to land, because they touched no. There was no damage done to any installation in the Navy Yard. Hickam Field, right outside. That is right outside of Pearl. Now they bombed the runways, but still they didn't do a tremendous amount of damage. It seemed like they were real careful not to damage any installations, so they must remember them that they were going to use that bait. Now, this Marine Railway, we had a couple of destroyers, be the Downs and the Shaw. One of them got
the Shaw blew up.
Blew up, the Shaw. But they were in the Marine Railway, which is where they could drag them out of the water up on things instead of going it right off. But outside of that, now there's two men subs. In fact, there's one sitting right out the sub base gate, probably still sitting out there. They picked it up. Pier 4 here, they got a machine gun down there, and he got credit for shooting down a Japanese plane. So they told me, no, I don't know, I can't be factual about it this way. But he did shoot a Japanese that was swimming. I mean, he got carried away. He just blasted him at this 50 caliber.
You know, whenever you had gone to bed, where was the barracks that you were sleeping?
My barracks I was sleeping in. I was not on the harbor. I was over town on the waterfront.
Okay, is that in Hawaii?
Hmm?
I mean, was that in Honolulu?
Honolulu, right downtown Honolulu. See, so I wasn't in Pearl Harbor. This was where I would have been sleeping, right there.
Okay, where's that?
If I hadn't been on patrol, I would have been sleeping here.
Okay, on the sub base.
That is the base. That looks like the barracks to me. That's approximately where it would be, right up here, whatever. Maybe it'd be closer in. But the barracks, Pier 4 up to the barracks don't seem that far, but it might have been that maybe was located up in here. That would be more like it, probably, where the barracks, they don't show it. From Pier 4. And that tank I was telling you about, that diving tank, that's where it's located, right off of Pier 4. And as far as I know, it's still there. The last time I was through, there was 58. Or through.
Whenever anyone mentions Pearl Harbor, what do you think of?
What do I think of? I don't, my inside feelings of how I felt about it at that time or what I think of it now. What I think of first, when I mentioned, is still the ships that I seen sinking and burning. That is my first thing that comes to my mind, of seeing all these ships. I mean, if you could have cried or done any good, you wouldn't. But here's the most powerful navy we thought in the world, and the capital ships are all out of commission or sunk, and you just couldn't believe it. You got that feeling in your, I don't know how you can explain that, feeling of just numbness, empty feeling in your stomach. There's nothing left.
What do you think of today?
Today, I try not to think about it. I think that the truth about Pearl Harbor and the attack, in my estimation, that somebody knew something in high government about the attack on Pearl Harbor. I really believe that. I don't think they expected to do that damage. If we would have had, let's say, even 15 minutes warning, so we could man our aircraft guns. Coming in that low as they came in, well, their guns are not accurate like they are today, or of course they hardly use guns today, but even the ones I would, they would have shot down lots of those guns, and they would have had to come in at different altitude, and they couldn't have did this damage. They just floated right in here and bang, bang, bang at treetop level, dropping torpedoes you can't miss. In my opinion, and I think that somebody had to know something. It's like I said, I never seen that many capital ships, big ships. And here, I couldn't. That Saturday, I said the 6th that you asked me about. I was amazed, and we talked about it. My runner mate and shore patrol, Cordray. I said, I can't believe that many capital ships that they could have brought in there for any reason. And one more warning they had that a lot of people have heard. One of our submarines, this is an 04 Stacker, and I'm not positive about the name, but it could have been the Aaron Ward. The Antares was a mine layer. She was coming in to the harbor. See, they had your net, submarine net. So she was coming in. That was about 6 o'clock in the morning, the 7th. She was in her, and they had opened the net. And this destroyer I'm sure it was an old four-stacker, sank a two-man submarine trying to follow the Antares into Pearl Harbor. Now that has been written about, and I think and quoted. And now, to me, I would think if I was in command of something, that would give me an indication of something. See, we got several, 3 or 4 of them inside of Pearl, the two-man subs, and sank them inside Pearl Harbor.
How'd they get inside?
They've come in through the net, probably like this one that followed the Antares in. They were small, real small people. They were like suicide things, because I don't see how they could have hoped to have ever got out. They didn't have that much. They couldn't have traveled. They had to be dropped off someplace. And how that carrier ever got that close, this is something that's still baffling. We had PBYs. PBY, it was an old 2-prop job, long range. I'll say for that time, I'll say probably had a cruising range of maybe 3,000 miles. But they ran regular patrol then for months. Like I was telling you, when the war alert, this PBY, they circled all out continuously. How that carrier got in that close without picking it up, they don't know. That was luck on their part, these PBYs, because they practically had us diving, coming in off the war patrol run. But when they seen you, they started making a run on you. They didn't ask any questions.
What did you do after everything settled down?
Yeah.
What happened then? What did you do then?
After it was all over and I got off shore patrol, I reported back to the Peleus. You have the name of it right there. That's subtender. I went on there. I made second-class petty officer while I was on there, and the Grayling came in. I needed a gunner's mate, and I went aboard the Grayling. That must have been March, probably February, March. She had made one war patrol run, short one. So I would say March, first part of March, I went aboard her. Then we made a war patrol run to Japan. We only had, believe it or not, 3 submarines operating around Japan. But we sank a lot of ships. Bungo Sweetie Straits, whether this is a correct pronunciation or not, it's an inlet to the inland sea in Japan. That was our station. When we went, the other submarine had left at a certain period, or was supposed to leave on a certain period. Then we were supposed to arrive within a few days to take up that same position, and that's what we did. We guarded tried to catch all the traffic we could coming out of this part, and we had one stationed around outside Tokyo to catch that traffic. We only had 3 submarines stationed right around there, but they did a lot of damage. See, Japanese had very few long-range boats. All of our newer boats, what we call the P boats, some people call them S boats, which is wrong. S boats are our small boat. We had them up in the Aleutian station. But the P boats, we were capable. We'd stop at Midway. We could carry 100,000 gallons of diesel fuel. They were batteries. No, didn't even have the snorkels on those. The ones I served on. They come out way late. And we stopped at Midway and topped off with fuel. And usually, when we went out, we went all the way on the surface until we were driven down. Because after they'd made the first patrol run, they figured, well, the Japs know we're here. And you can make so much better time on the surface. You can't make flank speed. It was 14 knots, and you can only do that for a matter of an hour, so your batteries run down. So you conserve. So we run on the surface until either we got within a certain range, say with where our station would be, maybe 150 miles, we may dive then. But if we didn't worry about if we were spotted and drove down or not, because they knew we were out there. And for some reason or other, the Japanese underestimated the depth that we could go, because their depth charges were set at too shallow. Because they'd get under. We were attacked several times, but we didn't worry too much as long as we had water underneath us where we'd get down.
Now, were you actually on submarines?
Yeah.
What submarines were you on?
Grayling.
Grayling.
In the paper, Chris Jones, she spelled it Grayline. It's Grayling, which is a fish, you know. Yeah.
What were your duties in the submarine?
Gunner's mate, I took care of the deck gun. We had a 3-inch deck gun. I took care of all pyrotechnics. And actually, I took over the seat. You had no, like bosun mates take care of the deck. Of course, you never but get the top side. But my job was a bosun mate's job too when we're in port. But at sea, and you stood regular watches. That was your biggest duty. You only have, I believe that I may be wrong. 65 is about a full crew. I think we had 67. I think we had an extra officer on there, and but 65 is approximately a crew. But you stand regular watches just like a seaman would on a. Now, no matter what your rate.
Where are your quarters in the submarine?
Where the quarters? I slept in a forward torpedo room, right over a torpedo.
You have
good bunks.
Hammocks or bunks?
Huh?
You have hammocks or bunks?
Bunks.
Bunks.
And they were good bunks. A lot better than you have on surface craft. Even then, you had a big, nice mattress. If you could be in them long enough to sleep, but that was your problem. Yeah, I stayed in it. My quarters forward torpedo room. Yeah.
What do you do with the deck guns when you're underwater?
It just up there. We used to plug them, try to seal them. We couldn't do it, so we just left them free flood.
So how do you get ready to fire with all the seawater?
That was my job, to try to go up and when I could get on deck. They didn't want anybody on deck except they would be a quartermaster, the officer of the deck, 3 lookouts, and the captain when he wanted to come up. That's all. You never wanted more than 6 people on deck, because when you dove, you had one little hatch, just like where you've seen them. I'm sure you've seen hatches on the round one, the manhole hatches, to get through. So if you put on your submarines, say they're just kind of U-shaped, like on top. This is your conning tower, right? I'm speaking of on top of the conning tower. You got this sort of U-shape. Back here, I had a mount for my 50 caliber machine gun. Well, I'm not much at this drawing bit, but we'll say this is see, this is the top of the conning tower. We'll say up here, forward, around here. All right, right in here, if you could draw this up here, you would have sort of lifelines here. We call them A-frames that come around there. Back here is what we call a cigarette deck. I suppose it come from an old term when maybe before the war you go back there and smoke. Of course you couldn't smoke in. And right here I had my mount for my 50 caliber machine gun, a water-cooled machine gun with no water. 50 caliber that I had to carry up through the hatch and mount it in case we had a battle service. That's a later story, but I don't know whether you want to hear that one or not. But here, you're standing right out here. Just room for you to stand. Right here. And these A-frames, because usually you're running with decks of wash. Stay down here, down here where you're below on your ship. the sub itself, you're running, say, with even if the seas were calm, there's probably a little water washing over them. That's so you can get down in a hurry. You're running with almost negative buoyancy. So, here, but these lookouts here, you grab this here, and right in the conning tower here, right inside, this is this manhole. Now all 6 people got to get through that one. So you had the officer's deck naturally was the last to come down. The lookouts was whoever got there first. You grabbed your A-frame and you swung and let your feet go down. You dropped down till you hit.
So this hatch is on the top of the conning tower.
Yeah, and right underneath here is your wheelhouse, really. See? That's where your steering, right below there. I can't draw pictures, I can make it better. But right below, that's where you fell, right down inside the conning tower. When you're on a dive, see, now this is your ceiling hatch to the outer side. So, but all these people have to come down through this little hatch, 6. And when the first word that the officer of the deck gives, who is to dive, is to clear the bridge. That's the first order you hear. The first order you hear is clear the bridge. That means for you to get below, like I said, get down that hatch. And when you start down that hatch, the minute you start down it, you can hear negative start to pep. It goes shh. You can't mistake that feeling. That means your ship, you're flooding negative to get down. So the reason you get down in a hurry. We figured we could. The captain says he can dive. He says my crew can dive in 15 seconds, which is not quite true. But
how deep did the bridge go?
That is another. But we never did get credit for this. And this rankles me. I think we made the first battle surface in the war. We come up right off of Japan in broad daylight. We couldn't have been over 4 miles off the coast, because I could put a 3-inch round on a beach, 4, 5 miles, and sank a patrol boat. Why the captain decided to do it, I don't know, but he looked around and couldn't see any other ship but this patrol boat. I guess it was a boat probably 125, 150 feet long, wooden hull. So the only word I got was, he sent the messenger up, says, send Berry up. And he says, we're going to battle surface. They got a patrol boat up there. It's not worth a torpedo. Torpedoes were valuable. They didn't want to use them. He says, we just go up and knock that little rascal off. And I said, so I started to get them. We had a system there. If we made a battle surface, and this was something where we was going to be, we would only use 12 rounds of 3-inch. That's the only weapon we had of common ammunition. He says, no, just take your 50 caliber. He said, and that 50 caliber, I'll tell you, weighs around 100 pounds. I carry it up. My quartermaster, he was big, 250 pounder. He carries one little box of ammunition. I don't know how they ever figured that out. But I go up and mount the 50 caliber. Soon as we surface, he says, I want you up, but I want to mount her. So we took him up and mounted my 50 caliber. And here we were within 1,000 yards or less of this patrol boat, just point blank range. So we used a 50 caliber. Anything we could see moving, we wiped everything clear on top of the deck. So then I told the gunnery officer was up there, and I told him, I says, I'm burning up. I got bullets was flying this way and this way. This water-cooled machine gun with no water, the barrel only lasts so long. I almost got out 250 rounds out of this. But we couldn't see anything moving, so I figured that's all, you know. So when it jammed, so I started down, and the captain says, man the deck gun. I get down to the deck gun, a 3-inch. And some ensign had been up there. And they were up there, and they were had the ammunition coming up. But this, like you were asking about why that we let how we took care of, kept the water out of the guns. Well, this is a case where it didn't. This has a vertical sliding breech plug on it. Well, they opened it all right, and when you load by hand in, and when you release the ejectors, it releases plugs under spring tension. Close it, but it wouldn't close. So the ensign was there, and he had already loaded, but he couldn't get it. And I always had two tools I carried in the conning tower as I came out: a maul and my hand cocking tool, just in case. So I had to run back in there, and I said, just let. And he pulled out, had him eject that and throw it over the side. I said, no more, don't throw. I don't want to waste ammunition. Stop. I'll be back. I just didn't take me 10 seconds. I was going to reach in the con and get my maul. So when he loaded the next one, then I hit it from behind with a maul, and that closed it, enough to close it. Then when the pointer fired, when I gave the order to fire, I was the gun captain, not two, okay. Nothing happened because it was froze up. So I told the pointer, I said, just stay on target. I took the maul, and this is a manual firing. It stuck. And so nobody ever tell me you can't fire one by hand. I did it, and then boom. Once we did that, it jarred everything loose. From then on, we fired about 10 rounds. We're lucky we hit it on a up roll, because these 3-inch com, and they're hard to set off. We punched a couple of holes in the hull, but it didn't explode. They have to hit something. So it must have rolled up and hit the engine room, because all of a sudden a big burst of fire came on. So that was it. The captain says, we went below. And we didn't really know it was sunk until Tokyo Rose told us that night that these Americans had sunk a defenseless fishing boat and all that stuff that she used to put on. That used to be our only entertainment, listen to Tokyo Rose out there.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever get credit for that ship?
No.
Why not?
I don't know how it was ever reported or not. But I did ask permission from the captain, and I says, let me land one on the beach. See, at that time, this is something else. There was somebody, you remember that the Japanese fired around in Oregon from a submarine at a fuel tank or something. And somebody from Oregon had said that they would give $5,000 reward for the first one that landed a shell on Japanese soil. So I told the guy, I asked permission, I said, permission let us elevate and land one on the beach. Permission not granted. Clear the bridge, deck. But I wanted I thought, well, maybe we collect that 5,000. See, after a while out there, you get like everybody else, a little flake. So, but it wouldn't have done any damage, but it would have put one over there. It's like Doolow's raid. It didn't do any damage, but it proved a point that we could do it. Anyhow.
So, the rest of the war, what'd you do?
Well, then we come back here as something that people know about, of the reason we knew of the Midway attack on Midway, that we broke their code and found out. Right after we came off patrol run, we used to go to the submarine crews got to go to the Royal Hawaiian for 5 days or 6 days, rest and recreation. Believe me, you need it after that long out there. About 80, I think we were on about 80 days. But we got in, and everybody's happy, we're going ashore, and we get ashore, and we get over to the hotel at 11 o'clock. I remember so well to get in. I had a little money. I won a little here and see. So I checked in my money, and I had it all set up. I had $100 that I was going to take out every day, and that was a lot of money in them times. I checked it in at the desk, and I'm going to draw me 100 every morning, and I'm going to have a ball. At noon, we got recalled. Just got in a room. And of course, all of us had to at least stop and have a beer or two or something. And we went back, by 4 o'clock we had everybody back, or 3 o'clock, time to round them all up, and come back. And we worked for about 2 or 3 days and nights. We took on torpedoes, refueled, took on them. Now this is the latter part of May, about, say around the 25th, maybe a little before that. So we took on all torpedoes, refueled, provisioned, and left Pearl Harbor. See, then you sailed, the captain always sailed under sealed orders. You're so far at sea, then he opens these orders. And when he read them to us, now this is what he said. Japanese will attack Midway, June the 6th at 0700. They had it down to the hour. And we had 21 submarines around Midway. And what the captain said, and it makes sense to me, he thought anyhow, of course I don't know where he is, he's probably thinking like that, but it sounded good. He said, we got 21 submarines around this island. And we're going to let the invasion force, they knew they figured invasion force was coming in, they get inside that ring of submarines. Then we would hit them with the surface and the air. And the submarine, we would have had, like shooting ducks on a pond. Because they couldn't fight submarines and surface craft too. But somebody, as you've heard, about spotted them way out and shot them too quick. I think, otherwise, of course, that was a turning point really of the war. We did win, but we lost a lot. And I think we would have sank everything out there if they would ever got inside. Then, my big and final story to you is about the Midway battle. On the morning of the 6th, we got orders to surface. They was, they'd already done the attack and the fighting was going on. And we, enemy cruiser, one of the Jap cruisers had been hit. So we come to surface because we could, submarine could, their flank speed is about 21 knots on the surface. So we were ordered to go out and sink this, because it could only, I think the captain said could only make about 8 knots, so we could catch it. So we're out on the surface chasing this. What happens? Here comes the Army's B-17s with no air forces on them. B-17. Now this, I was off watch at the time this happened in my bunk for once, and I got, and they said that the quartermaster said that there was 9 came over. Now see, we answered with challenge with searchlight. They had a certain, we just used a blinker system. The code said, I never could read one of them, but anyhow. And they answered and went on. Pretty soon, here comes 9 more. And he's challenged, and they didn't answer, so we told the officer of the deck is up there. He says, they're not answering, sir. He says, try again. And he says, no, they're not answering, and 3 of them broke out of formation. So, they, coming in, quartermaster, either the quartermaster told him or something, he says, it looks like they're making a run on us. And this after lookout I was telling you here, it's the redneck. He's got his glasses on, binoculars, see, and he's what? And you report everything. He said, report to the OD, he says, birds between us and the planes. About that time he said, birds, hell, them are bombs. And he took off, see. So, they cleared the bridge and dove. And the quartermaster was up there, and there was the officer of the deck, and I don't think he got down through the hatch. There were 2 we left the top side when they dove, and the captain was in the conning tower, and he missed the big quartermaster. One of us down the field. When him or the captain, both were big men, they went through this manhole here. The boat took a suction. They just closed that thing off. But He just take her up, take her up. So we just started down, so he took her up, just as the stick hit. And they said that the Army said later they dropped 21,000-pound bombs, and they laid a perfect stick right around us. Now, if we'd have been down, it might have broke us open, you know. But we just hit the surface skin because he wanted to take that quartermaster down and get him in. So then when he got in, we dove, and the Army, the B-7, its planes reported sunk, enemy cruiser, 15 seconds. See, because when the spray cleared, we were back, we were gone, we were down, no. And that's when the captain says, 15 seconds. He says, I know my crew could not have done it. But oh, he was burned up. And they
How
really,
come they didn't answer the challenge? How come they didn't answer the challenge?
they said later they thought it was anti-aircraft fire. That light, searchlight he was using. See, it's a strong beam light. That's what they said. But I had two, this was my job too, I think. I had two flares, I mount on each side up here, the bridge where this officer of the deck always is, right over here. I have two signal flares that, for identification purposes, and they changed colors. Like say from 12 to 4, you'd have blue. There, all the RS pilot takes is shoot up in the air like a rocket and then explode with blue light. And I mounted them too. That was my job before I went off watch. I mounted them, and every 4 hours I changed them. But this is something that happened too. The only thing I can think is the OD, who was the recent diving officer, said he pulled them. You have a lanyard, you just pull it and it fires them. They didn't fire. See, well, I was kind of on the spot, and I said, see, I kept them down below. They were dry. There was no reason. But when I took them off and examined, I found out why. They have a safety pin in them, and he forgot to pull that safety pin. See, and then that's when I woke up. All this had happened while I was still sleeping. Until when this stick hit, the messenger had just woken me up and says, the captain wants you in the conning tower now. And I just got out of my bunk when that first stick hit. And I landed on the deck, you know. So I runs up to the forward and control. And I have an underwater signal gun too. Works like a torpedo tube. The outer door you open to flood it. I load my torpedo. My signal flare. Then it's just a percussion primer on it. Then I open my outer door and then flood it and fire it with air pressure. So that's your emergency. What happened? The explosion evidently jammed it some way. I couldn't open the outer door. Oh, Captain. See, that was at least